What if I told you that the internet was never meant to handle this many devices? In 1983, engineers rolled out a system with 4.3 billion unique IP addresses, thinking that this would last forever. But as we know, then came phones, smartwatches, laptops, ovens, even some toilets need IP addresses. And today we've burned through almost all of them. In 60 seconds, I'll show you the moment where we actually hit the limit and what that means for us. But first, we need to understand what an IP address actually is, because everything that went wrong starts right there. You see, every device on the internet needs an identity. Your phone, your laptop, probably even your air fryer. And that identity is called an IP address. Think of it like a mailing address for your device. If you don't have one, nothing can reach you. That means no Netflix, no emails. Wait, I don't even want emails. Maybe that's a good thing. And no memes. Every time you check the weather or you're using Spotify, it's using your IP address so the internet knows where to send the data back. It's made up of 4 parts separated by dots. You've probably seen it before. Each part is called an octet, and it can be a number from 0 to 255. Why 255? That's a pretty good question. Each part of an IP address is 8 bits, and bits are just ones and zeros, and that's called binary. With binary digits, you can count from 0 with 8 zeros to 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. That's a lot of 1. And that makes 256 possible combinations. So 4 octets made out of 8 bits each, that's 32 total bits. And then you can do 2 to the power of 32 is 4,297,967,296, or like 4.3 billion unique addresses. You should have got that straight away. All right, enough numbers. So back in 1983, that amount of IP addresses felt infinite. But now it's actually laughably small, because it's not just people using IPs, it's devices. Phones, headphones, doorbells, elevators, data centers. The number of things needing an IP address exploded. And get this, we didn't just run out of IP addresses. We actually burned through millions before anyone realized what was coming. And it all started from how we structured the address space right from the beginning. We had enough IPs, barely, but the way that they were handed out, that's where things really went off the rails. This is how we wasted millions of IPs. So firstly, what does it actually mean to give out an IP address? When the internet was launched, there was one central authority called the IANA. They were in charge of distributing IP addresses. And instead of just handing out what you needed, they gave away entire blocks of addresses. These blocks were divided into different classes. Think of IP classes like different size containers. Class A was massive. 16 million IP addresses. Class B gave you around 65,000 IP addresses, and Class C just gave you 254. Each class came with a default subnet mask, which told the devices how big the network was and how many IP addresses it could use. This system is what later evolved into subnetting, which is a way to split up big blocks of IP addresses into smaller, more efficient chunks. Don't worry if you don't know what that is, we'll cover it in more detail in a later video. So this thing subnetting wasn't part of the original class system. And back then you couldn't just slice up class A or class B into something that you needed. That's why so many IP addresses got wasted. For example, if you needed 300 IP addresses, you were too big to fit in Class C, so naturally you'd have to go into Class B, which means you get 65,000 IP addresses instead of the 300 that you just needed. Companies like IBM or Xerox or HP got awarded Class A blocks, so over 16 million IP addresses that basically got wasted. Even if they only used a tiny portion, the rest of the IP addresses basically couldn't be touched by anyone. That's because reclaiming or reassigning some of those IP addresses was extremely difficult. Most of them were already hard-coded into legal systems or networks or legal agreements, so they couldn't get it off. So even when people realized how wasteful it was too late to fix this issue. And as bad as that was only mismanagement. What if I told you that we actually intentionally blocked off IP addresses as well? Multicast, loopbacks, experimental designs, millions of IP addresses that people can't even use. In this next section, I'll show you how much of the internet is really off limits. Oh, and by the way, something shocking is that you haven't liked the video yet, and you should. Please. That would be very nice. Anyway, on to the next part. The IP addresses you'll never touch. So far, we've seen how bad planning led to way too many IP addresses used by only a few people. But what made that situation even worse is that we intentionally blocked off areas of the internet that no one can use for everyday internet access. So let's break down the reserved zones of the internet, starting with one that's hiding on your computer right now. The first one is called a loopback address. It's kind of like your computer whispering to itself saying, "Hey, can you still hear me?" It's used to test your local network setup and no internet access is needed. But the odd part is the loopback function lives in this range here. This range is 16 million IP addresses, and we only needed 1. So millions of IP addresses got wasted. The next restricted zone is multicast in this range here. Imagine you're trying to send the same video live stream to a bunch of devices at once. Instead of making 100 separate connections, multicast lets you broadcast one stream to the entire group. That's super useful for things like stock trading or multiplayer games or video calls if your network supports it. But of course, most businesses and homes don't. So this entire block of over 268 million IPs is basically unusable by most people unless you have a specialized setup. What are we doing? Then you have Class E, which is experimental addresses. This was reserved for experimental use decades ago. But to this day, most operating systems still block Class E traffic by default. It's like a secret zone of the internet that we fenced off saying just in case, but we've never actually opened it back up again. So how much is actually off limit? Well, when you add it all up, Loopback is 16 million, multicast is 268 million, and experimental is another 268 million, which takes us to a total of 550 million IP addresses reserved and off the table. That's nearly 13% of the IPv4 space. So not only did we mismanage and badly allocate IP addresses, we also reserved a bunch that are never used. And while those sat idle, the number of devices on Earth exploded. Here's what happened next. Well, 1981, we had the first personal computer. 1983, the mobile phone. 2007, the iPhone. 2010, the iPad. By the mid-2010s, even fridges were online, and every one of them needed an IP address. And obviously, we weren't reclaiming the old ones, we were just running out of the ones that we had left. And then on February 3rd, 2011, the inevitable happened. The IANA gave out the final block of IPv4 addresses. It was over. No new companies could request IPv4 space from the global pool. From that point on, the only way to get IPs was to pay someone else. And with scarcity, obviously the price of IP addresses continued to increase. So the internet completely shut down, and that was the end of things. Thank you for watching. Psych. That's not what happened. So what did we do? Obviously, we needed something to fix this. We found a way to reuse the same IP addresses thousands of times, and we started building a brand new system on top of the old one. Let me show you how both patches work and why one of them is still holding the internet together today. See, patch number 1 was called NAT. Your house might have 10 plus devices connected to the internet. A phone, a laptop, a TV, who knows? But guess what? They don't each get their own public IP address. They share one, the IP of your router. So how does the internet know which device gets what? This is where NAT enters, or Network Address Translation. NAT is a trick that your router uses to pretend like it's doing everything. Inside your home, it gives each device a private IP address like this. But when those devices talk to the internet, the router swaps their private IP address for its one public IP address. It's kind of like sending out 10 letters from your home, but with only one return address. When replies come back, your router remembers this one's for the laptop, or this one's for the mobile, or this one's for the TV. That's NAT. It's a translator, it's a post office, it's a memory bank. So NAT was already slowing down the bleeding before we ran out of IP addresses in 2011. It's kind of like driving with a gas leak. NAT didn't fix the tank, but it slowed the leak enough so that we could keep going. But NAT had some problems. The modern internet wasn't really built for a middleman like NAT. Apps like Zoom or Skype or online games have to all work around NAT. That's extra relay servers and more latency. And sometimes it just breaks, as we know. So yes, NAT saved us, but it also made the internet a slower, messier place. And that's where patch number 2 came along. NAT was never meant to be forever. So in 1998, engineers realized we're gonna run out of IP addresses, so they said, why don't we just make more IP addresses? Like a lot more. So IPv4 gave us 4.3 billion unique addresses. IPv6 gives us 340 undecillion. I don't know if I said that right. I hope I did. Please don't blame me in the comments. Enough for every grain of sand on Earth to have a few billion IPs each. Crazy. So how did they do it? IPv uses 128-bit addresses instead of 32. That is 4 times the space, but exponentially more possibility. And there aren't the dots anymore. IPv6 looks slightly different. It looks something like this. Don't worry if you don't know what that means. Again, we'll cover it in a later video. So why does this actually matter? So here's the thing, IPv6 isn't just more numbers. It's cleaner, it's faster, and it's built for a different internet. In IPv4, we had to have all these different patches. Things were slower and they just kept getting messier and messier. IPv6 says, screw that all, let's just start over from fresh. No more address conflicts, so every device gets its own unique IP address. No more NAT hacks, so devices can talk to each other instantly without a middleman. There's faster routing, built-in security. IPv6 isn't just a bigger number, it's a better foundation. It's how we're gonna scale the internet for the future. So is everyone using IPv6 currently? That is such a great question. I'm glad I asked myself that. And the answer to that question is no. Because IPv4 and IPv6 are kind of like two different people speaking different languages. They just don't understand each other. If your app is on IPv4 and your internet service provider is on IPv6, things are just gonna break. It means the rollout of IPv6 needs to be slow, it needs to be careful, considerate across phones, across apps, across devices, cloud infrastructure. You can't just flip a switch. Everyone needs to agree to speak this new language, and spoiler, that takes years. How long, you might ask? No one knows. IPv6 was introduced in 1998, and as of 2025, about 45% of the internet runs on IPv6. Some countries are leading, like India has, I think, around 74%, and some countries are lagging. That's because internet service providers in some countries still rely on the legacy hardware because it costs time and money to actually scale this and change the infrastructure. There's no deadline, there's no switch off date, just this kind of slow, weird sort of world where both protocols run alongside each other. So that's the story of IP addresses and how IPv6 is gonna basically lay the groundwork for the next hopefully million years. Before you go, this was an incredibly different kind of video for me to make, so please leave a comment as to if you like this kind of video or you want to see more of it. That took a long time to make, so I appreciate any feedback. And as always, make sure to subscribe and check out our projects in the description below. As I said, you should do those networking projects if you want to learn more about IP addresses, route tables, subnets, some of the stuff we were talking about. You can learn it in detail even as a beginner or someone who has no experience at all. Peace out.